Good afternoon. My name is Vamala Pongan, and I'm the proud chair of the Rhode Island Citizens for Responsible Government and Senior Director, External Affairs at Planned Parenthood of Southern New England. And we're really proud that Rhode Island has been a strong and consistent leader in the reproductive movement in our country. Over the past 5 years, working alongside our legislative champions and administrations and coalition partners, we have passed historic legislation, including the Reproductive Privacy Act and the Equality in Abortion Coverage Act, to make abortion care protected in state law and more accessible to all Rhode Islanders. And this year, we were grateful that the state took further action to protect people's health and rights, as bans on abortion and gender-affirming health care continue to be enacted across the country. And right here in Rhode Island, we enacted protections for healthcare providers and patients who rely on transgender and reproductive health services with the passage of the Healthcare Provider Shield Act. And that's why we call on every Rhode Island voter to reject the Constitutional Convention so we can protect the great progress that we've made in our state. A Constitutional Convention opens the floodgates for special interest money to come into our state in a dangerous attempt to strip away the civil rights and protections currently afforded to all Rhode Islanders, including the right to make decisions about our health care free from government interference. Rhode Island must continue to move forward to ensure that everyone has the ability to control our bodies, our lives, and our futures. The threat to our reproductive freedom will continue. We know that overturning Roe was never the end game for anti-abortion opponents and their allies. They're working towards a broader agenda to roll back our rights and our freedoms, and they're coming after abortion care, family planning programs, birth control, IVF, gender-affirming care, and so much more. They're using every tool in their toolbox to push their narrow ideology on us and exert control over our bodies and our lives. But here in Rhode Island, we won't back down in the fight to protect and expand access to this essential health care for all people in the Ocean State. We've come too far and we won't go back. We've got a great lineup of legislative leaders today who have been on the forefront, the front lines of protecting and expanding reproductive freedom in Rhode Island. I'm so proud to introduce our first speaker, House Majority Whip Gaala Kazarian. Whip Kazarian has been a long-time leader for reproductive freedom in the House and was the lead sponsor in the Equality in Abortion Coverage Act, the EACA, and it was her leadership that helped it cross the finish line in 2023. Whip?
Thank you, Vamala. Thank you, everybody. I'm so happy to be here today and to be here with all my colleagues and share that I will be voting no on question number 1, and again, encouraging all Rhode Islanders to join me in voting no. I'm voting no for 3 main reasons. First of all, a constitutional convention would be expensive, it would be redundant, and most of all, it would be potentially dangerous. I'd like to take a step back and maybe shed some light on this constitutional convention process and expand upon those 3 points. First of all, it would be expensive. We would have to have a whole new election process for these delegates. It would allow outside money to pour into the state, outside money that would not have to be accountable and go through the process that the money goes through for us in the Rhode Island General Assembly and for our statewide elections. 2, it would be redundant. A lot of these issues that the delegates would consider are issues that are either already before the Rhode Island General Assembly or have already been considered by us. Again, we have an open and transparent process that we are very proud of that encourages voter participation and for people to come to the State House to express their views. And third, and most important of all, it would be very dangerous. The past few years here in the Rhode Island General Assembly, we've made some great strides to protect our environment, to protect our voters, our voting rights, and to protect abortion access in our state and access to health care. And if we allow these delegates to come in and to consider these different proposals, they could cut them. They could gut the great work that we have done in the state and the great strides that we have made. And worst of all, they would not be held accountable through the re-election process that our members in the General Assembly are held accountable for. So again, I am urging all Rhode Islanders to vote no on question 1. Please join me on November 5th and vote no for the Constitutional Convention. Thank you, Vamala.
Thank you, Whip Kazarian. Our next speaker is Representative Jennifer Stewart, who has been a strong leader in fighting to expand and protect our civil rights, and a member of the Rhode Island Black, Latino, Indigenous, and Asian American Caucus, RIBLIA. Rep. Stewart.
Thank you. Sorry. I want to thank the organizers of today's event, the RIAFL-CIO, and all the members of the Rhode Island Citizens for Responsible Government Coalition for an opportunity to join everyone here, my wonderful colleagues in the General Assembly and advocates throughout the state, to publicly say that I will vote no on ballot question 1, and I hope that everyone will join me in doing so as well. I am voting no on 1 because the risk that a constitutional convention poses to the issues, policies, and priorities that I value is too great. A constitutional convention at this time, like we've heard, in 2024, under the Supreme Court ruling and Citizens United, has the potential to unleash unintended consequences and undermine our hard-fought victories for civil rights, civil liberties, women's rights, and worker rights. We only need to look to states that have embarked on constitutional conventions since Rhode Island held its last one in 1986. There haven't been too many, but during the Connecticut Convention in 2008, the Connecticut Catholic Conference spent over $300,000 in an effort to overturn same-sex marriage. And if we compare the convention to ballot measures that have emerged through the voter initiative process elsewhere in the US, we have every reason to expect to see efforts that would ban or reduce access to reproductive rights, diminish equal rights for LGBTQ Rhode Islanders, attack the rights of immigrants, decrease healthcare access and coverage, and reduce the protections that workers enjoy here. And in 2022, over $1 billion was spent on ballot referenda campaigns throughout the US. And in closing, I want to acknowledge that we have more work to do in Rhode Island to ensure it is a place where each of us can lead the lives we'd like with the dignity we deserve. And as a member of the House, I know that the pace of change is often slow and the prospects for progress are often uncertain. But to work around the legislative process is to introduce risks and a lack of accountability, like we've heard, that are just too great. Let's not risk the progress we've made, and please join me in voting against question number 1. Thank you.
Thank you, Rep. Stewart. Our next speaker is Senator Tiara Mack. She has been an outspoken advocate for so many important issues, including fighting for LGBTQ plus communities and reproductive justice. Senator Mack.
Thanks, Vamala. One thing I want everyone to have ingrained in their mind between now and the election on November 5th is that the Constitutional Convention is dangerous, expensive, and redundant. It is a tool that hasn't been used as often in the 21st century at all, and it was a tool most commonly used in the 19th century when states were becoming states and joining the Union. It was then used as a tool in the 19th and 20th century for states to leave the Union and form the Confederacy. The legacy and the tool of using a constitutional convention has no place in 21st century politics. And since the last constitutional convention that's been held in Rhode Island, we have seen things like Citizens United be used as tools to now have private influence and public citizens with lots of money to come in with their special interests and influence the will of the people. Well, because we are legislators, we're standing up here today who are urging voters to reject question number 1. We already have the tools necessary to change the laws in Rhode Island to work for Rhode Islanders. Many folks say that there are plenty of things that we can change that have been too slow in the General Assembly because there hasn't been quote unquote political will. We already have the tools to change the Constitution in Rhode Island. In fact, it was most recently changed in 2020 in November when voters voted to officially change the state name of Rhode Island. So we can, without a constitutional convention, still use tools at our disposal in the State House to make sure Rhode Island works for Rhode Islanders. We don't need to open up our state, our Constitution, or the rights of many vulnerable communities to special interest groups or to anyone who has enough money to pay to play in our states and in our politics. The folks who would be elected to the 75-member delegation for the Constitutional Convention will never be in front of voters again. There's no guarantee that they'll be accountable to their role in shaping the way that Rhode Island does, or more likely and historically does not work for Rhode Islanders. Rhode Island has had 11 constitutional conventions, or has proposed 11 constitutional conventions. 4 of them have failed. The history of constitutional conventions is not on the side of progress, it is not on the side of Rhode Islanders, and it's not on the side of being a tool to actually get what we need to make our state work for those who need it most. And at a time when we have more division than ever in our politics, we need to band together and make sure that we have more tools and more people who are elected by Rhode Islanders, everyday Rhode Islanders, who are committed to making sure that our state works for the folks who live here, call here home, and will see Rhode Island for another 10, 20, and 50 years be their home. It's a dangerous tool, it's an expensive tool, and it has no place in our current politics. And I urge voters to really recognize that this is a moment for us to say that our politics is not for sale, our rights are not for sale, and the people who want to see a constitutional convention, I urge you to look at the history, I urge you to look at what they have been used for in the past, and to read Rhode Island's Constitution. There are many things that we are still fighting for at the State House, and that comes with electing bold, progressive, new leaders who are going to center working class people, that are going to center the folks who build our state, our unions, our great workers, our teachers, and everyone who calls Rhode Island home. And those are tools that we can use by activating our voice at the ballot box, by rejecting question number 1, and holding our states accountable to what's going to make it work for every single person. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Mack. Our next speaker is Representative Karen Alzate, the former chair of RIBLIA. She has been a leading champion of women's rights and access issues in Rhode Island, including leading the fight to expand and protect fertility health care. Rep. Alzate.
Thank you for that. Thank you all so much for being here. It is an honor to stand with my colleagues in the House, making sure that we are advocating to reject question 1. While on the surface, a convention may seem like a pathway to necessary reforms, it is also fraught with risk that can lead to unintended and irreversible changes. First and foremost, once a constitutional convention is convened, there's little control over what issues can be addressed. This open-ended nature means that even issues unrelated to the initial intent can be put on the table, leaving room for special interests, as we've heard, to influence the process and push their own agendas. A convention opens the door to weakening established protections and rights, something that we at the legislature work towards every year. The Constitution serves as the backbone of our democracy, protecting civil liberties, safeguarding individual rights, and establishing checks and balances that prevent abuse of power. Although these protections could lead to a system that may not serve the people as intended, with sweeping changes that undermine the stability and equity we rely on. Consider the expense and division, because I speak 2 languages, that a convention would likely bring. Convening a constitutional convention is a costly endeavor, demanding resources, time, and taxpayer dollars. Additionally, debates on fundamental issues may deepen divisions within our society, making consensus difficult and fostering instability. Let's be mindful of the risks that come with changes our nation's fundamental document. We must pursue reforms through legislative and democratic processes that safeguard the rights and principles we hold dear and near, without opening a Pandora's box of potential consequences. Quiero dejarles saber que por favor digan no a la primera pregunta en su tiquete el próximo martes. Yo he votado y he dicho que no, y también le digo a mi familia que digan que no a la primera pregunta. Gracias.
Thank you, Rep. Karen Alzate. in 2 languages too, so that's very good. And closing us out today is our lead sponsor on the Senate side of the EACA, Senator Bridget Valverde, who has been a longtime champion of reproductive freedom and helped to get the EACA past the finish line on the Senate side. Senator.
Thank you, Vamala, and thank you to all of my colleagues and everyone that came out here today. Everyone has raised some excellent arguments for why we should be rejecting question 1. I know like thousands of Rhode Islanders who have already voted. I have already voted to reject question 1, and I would urge everyone who is listening today to do the same. I'd like to relay a conversation that I had with a constituent on Monday. A man named Ron called me and he said, Senator, I'm trying to fill out my mail ballot and I am a little bit confused about question 1. Can you help me? And I said, sure, what's your question? And he said, well, it says here that we are going to elect delegates to a constitutional convention to make decisions about our constitution, and then voters are going to then vote on them. And he said, don't we already have a process for that? Don't we already elect legislators like you, who go to the State House, who listen to testimony, who hear from their constituents, and then enact laws, and when necessary, put a constitutional question on the ballot directly through the legislative process. And I said, Ron, you have interpreted this exactly right. It is a redundant system. And so he said, okay, you know what? I'm going to vote no, and I'm going to tell all my friends to vote no as well. And I said, thank you very much. Have a great day. You know, the fact is, when it comes to reproductive rights, which is the main thing that we're talking about here, in 2019 and in 2023, we finally were able to protect reproductive rights here in Rhode Island after decades of work by Rhode Islanders across the state. We cannot afford to let out-of-state money, dark money, come into our state and drag us backwards, especially considering the political climate that we are in nationally right now. So I urge everybody to consider these excellent arguments that have been made today and reject question 1 on November 5th or beforehand if you're going to vote early like I did. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. So that wraps up our press conference today. Thank you to Representatives Alzate, Kazarian, and Stewart, and Senators Valverde and Mac for your leadership. And we're confident that Rhode Island voters will vote and to reject question 1. Thank you. Steve, if you have any questions.
I'm good. Thanks.